Now, Sports Talk with Broads. Here's Hunter Brody.
Oh, the Sixers do it to us again. They fall to the Orlando Magic. Another bad loss for this team. But here's the thing. It's frustrating. It's frustrating, absolutely. But I know this team can compete. I know this team, when willing, can really battle and really make some noise. The problem is they keep falling to these bad teams, and it will cost them a seed or so in the playoffs if they don't get their act together. I am not to the point where I now think this basketball team is horrendous. See, this is the thing that I can't stand. When they beat the Milwaukee Bucks on Christmas Day, it's a big deal. We can make the finals. We can beat the best team in the East. Oh, wow, we can totally make a run at this thing. And then when they lose the following game, after winning 3 straight, may I add, when they lose the following game after that big one against Milwaukee, now the team sucks and there's no way they can do anything. I can't stand the flip-flop emotional fan. I can't understand it. Know what this team is. This team, when they are willing to compete, can totally go up against any squad in the league. It's just reality. We have seen it so far this season. The problem is they're not getting up. The problem is they think they can walk through these bad opponents. That's a problem in terms of the regular season. But when it comes to the playoffs and when it comes to going up against some of these top dogs, all right, I know they're going to bring it. I know their mindset changes. It's not right. It doesn't mean it's right. And if you want to have the conversation that they need to figure it out in the regular season so they can get a higher seed, I can get behind that. But what I can't get behind is now claiming that the team is the worst team ever. There's no way they're going to be able to make it. There's no chance in hell they can make a run at the Eastern Conference Final, because that's two different circumstances. It really is. The seeding will help them get a better chance to do it because it will have an easier first round matchup and maybe home court advantage in the second round. But it doesn't mean it's impossible, because when the team is locked in, which, oh, by the way, that will happen in the playoffs, when they are locked in, they are a different type of beast that can compete, that can play elite defense. It just comes down to, will they be able to score enough in those games in the half court set? But that's a different discussion. This comes down to effort. This comes down to having the ability to keep the switch on when it comes to playing a bad basketball team. And apparently they are not capable of doing that every single time a bad team comes to town or when they go to a bad team. There's plenty to talk about, but before we do, I need to let you know about the sponsor, SeatGeek. When you use SeatGeek and buy tickets, you can get $20 off. All you need to do is use the promo code BROADS, and that's essentially free parking. You can put that towards beer. It's simple. Get your tickets today and save yourself $20. Promo code BROADS. Use it today. I did have a feeling that this loss was automatic, just based off of what I've seen with this team to this point, and knowing the emotional difference between the Milwaukee Bucks on Christmas and going to Orlando in a quiet building in a town no one cares about, going up against a really bad basketball team. The Orlando Magic have 2 wins against a team above 500, and oh yeah, it's the Sixers both times. So don't give me their record and say that they're a good team or they're not that bad. No, they're bad. They just beat the Sixers when they don't feel like working hard. I've been on 97.3 ESPN from 2 to 6, filling in for Mike Gill pretty much all week except for Christmas. And after that game, I've stated, like, it's just so Sixers to come up big, come up clutch, put in a fantastic effort against the Bucks, and then fall flat on their face against the Orlando Magic. Like, I'm not surprised. I literally saw this coming and stated it from the jump after the Bucks win. It's not right. It's not what I want to know, but I knew it. I mean, you could just sense it. That's what this team is all about. One thing that really stood out to me, though, was the fire under Brett Brown after the game. He was so emotional to the media, and not to the media because of them or anything that they were asking, but because he was so pissed off with his team. And you normally don't see Brett Brown to this degree, so maybe that is a statement. Maybe that switch is something for these players when they realize how pissed off Brett Brown really was. I mean, we can date back to last season when Jimmy Butler saw Brett Brown fired up after a game, or was it mid-game? It might even been at halftime of a game. I forget if it was after a game or if it was halftime of a game. I think it was halftime, but regardless, Brett Brown has used this emotional side of him to really get something out of his team before, and hopefully that's what this does. To me, this was all on the players not going out there and working hard. I mean, they didn't want to. They just went through the motions. They decided, all right, let's just go out there. We just beat the Bucks. We can do this. And clearly, that's not how this works. It's frustrating. But to hear about how inconsistent they are, they're so inconsistent. If you want to look at it as inconsistent as they beat the good teams and lose to the bad teams, fine. But they're 23-11. When I look at 23-11, that doesn't tell me that they are an inconsistent teams by any means. I mean, they win basketball games. I had a conversation with my buddy about this. When you look at them, right, and you look at the Heat, and you look at the Celtics, and you look at the Toronto Raptors, are they not in the mix with everyone else? I mean, that's just what it is. They're in the mix with everyone else. His counter argument is, well, they shouldn't be. It should be the Bucks, the Sixers, and then those squads. The reason the Sixers are in the mix with everybody else is because they lose to the bad teams. And that's fair. They do lose to bad teams, and when you look at some other teams, do they lose to the bad teams as much as the Sixers? It doesn't feel that way, but we don't focus on the other teams the way that we focus on the Sixers. In an 82-game season, so many of the good teams lose to bad teams. So many of the good teams go through these spurts, and you just don't realize it because you don't focus on them the same degree that you focus on the Sixers with every single shot they take, with every single dribble they have. You don't have the same care level for them, so it just goes right underneath the radar when these other teams that are fighting for seeds in the Eastern Conference, when they lose to bad teams, you just don't notice it because you don't care. It happens all the time. I'm not saying it's right that it's happening with the Sixers. I'm just saying it happens. It's happening a little too much for my liking. It's okay for it to happen, but it does seem to happen a little bit more than it should with the Sixers. So it does need to be fixed. It does need to be addressed. But this isn't something random. This isn't something that, oh, this never happens in sports. No, I mean, this happens in any sport all the time to any team. So when it comes to this game, the Sixers had a lead at half by a point because of a putback by Ben Simmons. Then the third, they went on this nice run and had a little bit of separation until here comes the Magic. They just go down and take it right back. The Sixers didn't feel like playing defense, I guess. They definitely did not have the intensity that they had against the Milwaukee Bucks. I can tell you that for free. They didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to get in the lanes. They didn't want to, really put in 500% when it comes to effort. They just didn't want to. Late, real late, it was pretty crazy. It was wacky, actually. Some missed free throws by Markelle Fultz, a bad inbound pass by Ben Simmons, but Ben Simmons makes up for it late in the game when he gets a big steal out of an inbound and gives it to Joel Embiid, who had to have a heave to try and then make this something for the Sixers, but he wasn't able to. It was pretty much a heave to an extent. It wasn't a serious set his feet and take a legit three-pointer. He did make some big shots down the stretch, Embiid did, and everyone looks at the 11 three-pointers, and oh, I can't believe he's shooting out on the perimeter all game. I can't believe it. Joel Embiid shoots threes. I'm sorry to break it to you. And a couple of those were very late in the game, so it makes the 11 look way more obnoxious than it really is. Joel Embiid shoots threes. Centers in this league shoot threes. I'm sorry, Mr. Old School guy that think that the big man needs to be in the low block every single time. It would be different if Joel Embiid never went in the block. But I mean, statistics show you he has his back to the basket and he is in the post more than any center in the NBA. So that's why I can support the three-pointers, because it's not as if he doesn't ever have his back to the basket. Stats will show you that he does. So I'm okay with him shooting threes. I'm sure the same people that can't stand it, which if you can't, you got to realize this is basketball these days, so figure it out because you're going to continue to see it. But I'm sure those same people that can't stand it sure loved it when he knocked down big shots against the Milwaukee Bucks. The dude is capable of making threes. It's also not like Joel Embiid shoots 22% from behind the arc. He puts it in from a league average standpoint. So I'm sorry to break it to you. The guy can make it happen. He can shoot the threes. 11 is obviously high. Like I said, a couple of those were late in the fourth quarter during that miraculous little run, and he popped whatever. I mean, 11 is a little high, but to think that's the reason the Sixers lost the game, no, that's not the reason why the Sixers didn't win the game. The reason they didn't win the game was, as a whole, they were not ready to play the game. They did not feel as if they had to try. Right? I mean, isn't that it? It's because they didn't think, as a whole, the whole unit, they didn't feel like they needed to try. And that even goes to the bench. The bench was awful in this one. I'm so disappointed in James Ennis's effort. I'm really disappointed in Mike Scott. I mean, I don't know what to tell you about this guy. You know, I thought at some point it would just be a funk, but this funk has lasted 30-plus games at this point, and he needs to figure it out, you know? I don't feel sorry for the guy. He's a pro athlete who's been around for a long time, right? So it's not as if this guy just flat out is an embarrassment. He's been around and hung around for a while because he does have value to a team. He does give that attitude, that swagger to a team. He's a hardworking dude. He knocks down threes. Like, he needs to figure his game out. He has to come together because we can't be having this type of Mike Scott. Matisse Thybulle being out, it kills this bench. Furky, he had 7 points in this one. It should have been 5 because I think that goaltending on Markelle Fultz was actually a clean block. They barely gave us the replay, I think, because they understood that the referees made a mistake and they didn't want to go back to it or mention it. I don't know. I mean, it was close. It was bang. Regardless, when it comes to shooting the ball, I think he has confidence right now. Obviously, I'm not a big Furkan Korkmaz believer. I think he is atrocious defensively, even though he had a couple steals in this one. All around, when you play these athletic guards, when you play these legit studs in this league, he's going to get abused, but he can make some shots happen. His 7 points was the best off the bench. So, you know, he's the farthest from the issue in this game as a whole. I'm way more disappointed in the way the starters were clocked in mentally. I'm really disgusted with that, but I'm really upset with when it comes to the bench, Mike Scott and James Ennis specifically. They just have to be better. I mean, they've been around for a while. They're veteran players. They know what it takes. They know what their role is. Snap out of it. Snap out of it. I was never this big believer in James Ennis, and I'm not going to tell you he's the worst thing in the world after one game because I don't think one game tells the story. But there are moments with James Ennis, it's weird. It's like there's moments where it's like, wow, James Ennis knocked down 4 threes tonight and he had 4 offensive rebounds. What? That's a little obnoxious. That's really great. Like, there's nights when he does that, and I almost think, well, that's not going to happen on a consistent basis. And then there's games where it's like this, where he's flat out awful, and I feel like you get either one of those more than you get just an average game out of James Ennis. Maybe because they stick out to me more. Maybe that's what it is. I mean, it's very similar to what I stated when it comes to other teams losing to bad teams. You know, it doesn't stick out to you as much because you don't care. Well, maybe now that I'm talking about this now, it's kind of going in my head. Well, maybe he does have some more average games, and I think it just doesn't pop as much because the ones that are great pop more than the ones that, you know, are just mediocre. But I don't know. It just to me, James Ennis, he was never anything special off the bench. I mean, we signed him off the street for a reason when we needed depth off of our bench when times were really bad with our bench. I mean, it was bad in this one, but it was nowhere near as pathetic as it has been in the past. I just don't know what James Ennis really is at the end of the day, is my point. Bench needs to be better. This Al Horford bashing is hilarious to me. No one remembers what it was like without Joel Embiid last year in the playoffs, right? I mean, when he left the floor, the team got waxed when Joel Embiid would be the reason why the team was even in the games, and then he would have to leave the floor. Mike Scott would play the 5, and the team fell apart completely, and opposing squads would dominate and score so many points and go on a sick run. I mean, there were points where Joel Embiid left the game for 50 seconds, and somehow the opposing squad would go on an 11-1 run, and then you'd have to put Embiid back in. The guy could get no rest. Okay, Al Horford is very meaningful to this team. I know at times he misses shots, and when you watched him play against those Sixers in years past, you thought he was the Sixers killer, and he would always have good games against the Sixers because he gets juiced up, he gets amped up to play against a big-time rival. I totally get it. Now you're seeing him for 82 games, and hold on, have you heard me say this before? It's completely different when you watch someone play for 82 games compared to just, say, 4 or 5. So you need to realize, yeah, Al Horford's not going to be this offensive stud every game, and there are going to be times where he struggles. He's an older guy, okay? But when it matters, when the playoffs come around, when big moments come around, and when Joel Embiid has to go to the bench, Al Horford gives you a legitimate veteran presence at the 5. He gives you a guy who knows what playoff basketball is all about. He gives you great defensive minutes. I mean, it's ridiculous to now think all of a sudden, right, after he does such a great job against the Milwaukee Bucks, and then he has a performance against the Orlando Magic, that the contract's awful. I can't believe Elton Brand did this. This Sixers fan base sometimes blows my mind. It's driving me crazy. It really is. Once again, you could be annoyed, frustrated, and there's a lot of things that you can be when it comes to this team losing against bad teams. But some of the stuff I hear is just not logical. It's just so reactionary and so emotional, and I understand that's the part of Philadelphia sports, but sheesh. One game compared to the next game, it's two extremes. The team is still good. They're still in the mix with everyone else that is good in the Eastern Conference. They just got to figure out this whole getting up for bad teams. I'd be more concerned if they were beating all of these bad teams and then losing to all the good ones. That's way more concerning. Now, once again, this doesn't mean that it's acceptable to continue to lose to bad teams, right? I mean, listen. Just because I'm saying this, it doesn't mean it's acceptable to lose to the bad teams. But there is something to be said, and there is value in the Sixers beating the Raptors, beating the Boston Celtics in Boston and at home, for them beating the Denver Nuggets, for them beating the Raptors, for them beating the Heat, for them beating the Bucks. There's things to be said about those wins. When they have the proper mentality, which goes on the players, right? The players, the professional basketball players, the ones that get paid millions of dollars to play the sport. When they have the right mentality, they can make it happen. They can beat good teams in this league. And that's what they're going to have to do when it gets meaningful. And hey, let's be real. When it comes to the basketball season, this is about the time when people say the NBA begins. Nothing matters before Christmas. Now it's post-Christmas. Now it's time to flip the page. When the new year comes around, now it's time to flip the page to the NBA. So it's a different season now. The Sixers are now 1-1. They beat the Bucks. They lose to the Magic. Let's see what they're made of. They got a tough stretch coming up. They have the Miami Heat on a back-to-back. Absolutely they do. The Heat are also in a back-to-back situation. I know they have... Who else do they have? They have some good teams. I know Houston's in there. I think OKC is in there. Then there's one other team that's slipping my head. Maybe the Boston Celtics are in there as well. Regardless, there's some good squads coming up. And some of them are on the road, which is good. Good. It's actually bothering me, so I'm going to have to look this up as we speak. Okay, so they have the Miami Heat, then the Indiana Pacers, the Rockets on the road, the Thunder at home, the Celtics at home, then the Mavs, then the Pacers. I mean, they got a tough stretch. They absolutely have a tough stretch, and I'm here for it. I want to see them beat the good teams. And on the road, sure, I want to see them beat the good teams. The refs in this game, they were awful. And they were not the reason why they lost. I'm not saying that. They were not the reason why they lost. The reason why they lost is because of the way the Sixers played. But it is possible for the Sixers to play bad and the refs to just be the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I actually tweeted at the NBA and tweeted at the NBA officials that they needed to be fired after this game because it was one of the worst performances I think I've actually ever seen in my entire life. When you look at some stats, I mean, Fournier, Gordon, and Vucevic was definitely factors. Markelle Fultz, I never really got to him, and it's funny, I have written here on my notes, I hate the face. I just can't stand the face of Markelle Fultz. He bothers me. I don't believe in the injury thing. I think it was all mental. He's putting up, I believe he averages around 11.7 points per game. That's great. And he's only playing around 26 minutes or so I get it. He's not logging in legit 30-plus minutes, but that's great. It's the same thing it's always been. You see a spurt here and there of like, wow, that was a really nice move. That was a nice spin around me. You see his athleticism, but I hate the face. I can't stand him. I just cannot stand him. I don't root against him. I just don't care about him. I just don't care about him. There should never be a discussion on if the Sixers should have kept him. Absolutely not. There's no reason for them to keep that type of money on the books and try and groom him when they can get someone like Tobias Harris and now Horford with that cap money situation and can build this way. I mean, there's no reason to even have the discussion on what the Sixers did and if it was right or wrong. It was obviously right. There's just no doubt about it. It was the right move. So get out of my face, Markelle Fultz. I just can't stand looking at him. I think that's fair. Looking at some stats for the Sixers, Embiid 24-11, Toby 24-11, Josh 15-6-3. That's Josh Richardson, of course, and Ben Simmons 13-7-9, but still not the most aggressive Ben Simmons that I'd like to see. But you don't know what you're gonna get with Ben. The stats, they don't really tell the game because it just flat out wasn't good enough and their focus level wasn't there. They weren't willing to battle. They weren't willing to do the little things that they needed to do to win a basketball game on the road. And even if it's against a bad team, they didn't do what was needed to win a basketball game against a bad team. And that's the frustrating thing. How do you go from beating the Milwaukee Bucks, which is the best team in the Eastern Conference, to losing in Orlando? It comes down to being willing. And they weren't. And that's where we're at. So it's not like we got to wait a long time. We don't have to wait a long time. The Miami Heat, they're waiting. I would love to see this team go into Miami and get a good win. To do what they did against the Milwaukee Bucks, I would love to see it. It's going to be a hostile environment. It's going to be a tough place to play, without a doubt. Prove to me that if you want to go out there and play defense to an elite degree, if you are willing to do that, if you want to do it, you can do it. You can make it happen. You can win the basketball game. I want to see it. Be so pissed off that you let one slip that the Miami Heat don't know what hit them. They have it. Let me know your thoughts down below on this one. I'm sure the comments will be very interesting. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, and I will see you next time.